friends, Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, back again with another video, and today I am setting up my bullet journal for July, and Yoda is not only there with me in the past as I started working on the cover page painting, but she's also here with me in the present as I record this voiceover, purring and licking my hand. So if you hear noises, it's probably her. Anyways, this month I decided to do a theme inspired by my new connection with the local fauna, specifically our birds locally. As you may know if you follow me on Instagram, I have started feeding the birds this year, and I'm having lots of fun seeing all the different species of birds that come to visit and have a little snack, and trying to convince them that I'm not scary so they won't fly away when I go outside, and just generally really enjoying the process. I think this might be the strongest sign of my entering the next stage of adulthood, the fact that I have now started bird watching. I feel like that must be a rite of passage, right? Anyway, follow me on Instagram if you want to see some stories of various birds coming to visit. I do share them semi-regularly, but I decided this time to create some art inspired by it and kind of a little bit of a vision board, try to manifest my future, which is that I really want to get to the point where birds will land on me and eat out of my hand. I am truly trying to live out my Snow White / Cinderella fantasy, and so I decided for my cover page to create some artwork of a hand with a bird perched on it. And as I was trying to pick what kind of bird to draw, I knew I wanted to pick one of the species that we have visiting us regularly. And I feel like in the last couple weeks, more than any other species, we've had a lot of house sparrows visiting. And I specifically decided to draw and paint a male house sparrow because, as per usual with many bird species, the male of the species has more color and pattern going on, and the female of the species is more subdued and muted. So as you can see, I have a little reference image here. This reference image was more to help me with the inking and is not quite the color I'm going for. I actually ended up finding another image when I got to the painting stage that was a little closer to the average coloring of the house sparrows that are visiting our house, which are more gray than brown on their bodies and also have sort of a mohawk of gray on the top of their heads. So the coloring is not going to be exactly like this reference photo, but I wanted to use this as a reference as I was doing inking, just to kind of remember where all the different markings go. I went back and forth on the style I wanted to go for, but I ultimately decided to try to make things easier for myself by creating a very, very simple line art style hand, and not even try to make the hand hyper realistic because hands are hard enough as it is, and then to just focus on trying to make the bird look very realistic, for it to be the only thing painted and really draw your attention, and for the hand to just kind of be sketched in there, you know? Secondary to the bird itself. Again, this is me putting out into the universe that I would like the birds that visit us to be my friends and not be afraid of me, please and thanks. I shared this meme on my stories on Instagram recently after my sister sent it to me, and it's just so perfectly accurate. Every time a bird flies away when I step out onto our patio, I just cry a little inside that they can't recognize that I am a huge animal lover and would never do anything to harm them. I was able to use almost entirely dried paint that was already on my palette for this, which was awesome. A mix of oranges and browns and black. As per usual, when I'm using watercolors, I like to try to start with the lightest areas and kind of work my way up to the darkest, brightest, most opaque colors, working in layers. So I'm starting here with any of the areas that are light on the bird's body, so its actual body, the side of its face, sort of the cheek area, and then the mohawk area are all gray, again on the version of the house sparrow that I'm using that looks most similar to the ones that visit our house. I'm just wetting my brush and going into the dried black paint on my palette and picking that up and applying it to my paint. Hi, Chewy. Oh, hi. I'm recording a voiceover, bud. Yeah, is that okay? You can't really see it, but I do have a small piece of scrap watercolor paper right in front of me that I'm using just to test what I have on my brush before I apply it to my painting, just to check that the color is right, but also that the opacity is right for what I'm looking for. Especially when I'm working with dried paint on my palette, it can be a little bit harder to get the amount of water to the amount of pigment right, at least for me. Once the gray areas were in and had a little bit of time to start to dry, I wanted to add in some of that orangey base for the sideburns, but also for the wings. I'd say house sparrows come across mostly brown on their wings, but they do have a really warm undertone, and house sparrows I've seen in person, when their wings catch the light, definitely have that sort of gingery orange undertone. So I wanted to start with orange as the base and kind of build it up from there to make sure that there was some richness to the color and hopefully to have that kind of glowing amber sort of look that they have in person in the light. I also wanted to get that warm base in for the sideburns, even though I am going to end up adding more color, darker and redder, to try to match what I've seen. I'm also using a brush that is almost dry and has very little orange pigment left on it, just to add a tiny bit of warmth to the belly of the bird, to its side. I just wanted it to be not 100% gray, to have a little more dimension and a little more warmth in a couple spots. I'm grabbing some primary red paint and mixing it with my orange mix here to get something just a little redder that's still not, a bright primary red, but much more red than anything else on the bird for those sideburns. But I definitely needed something a little brighter and a little more red than what I could get from what I already had on my palette. Once the orange on the wings was dry, I grabbed a really fine detail brush and picked up some of the black paint from my palette and started adding the details on the wings. Male house sparrows have black on the tips of their feathers and even some sort of spots and minor stripes of black. So I really wanted to add those with the paint so that they would be dark and have lots of contrast, instead of doing it in the inking stage and then painting over top and kind of muting out that ink, which tends to happen with watercolor when it dries over top of ink, and then probably having to go over it once again. I decided to just leave these details for the painting stage. I also, at this point, darkened up the black feathers on the chin and the chest, as well as painting the beak black and painting sort of the little bit of a stripe from the beak to the eye and kind of around the eye, because there are some black feathers in that area. I kept using the same brush that had very little water and pigment left on it to add some more little black details here and there, just little indications of feathers and texture, and just darkening up certain areas, adding a bit of shadow in certain areas as I felt was needed. At this point, I grabbed my mix of red and orange again on my detail brush and started adding just a couple little spots of this more saturated color to the wings, because again, in my reference photo that I found that was closer to what I've seen in person, there are just a couple areas of the wings that, again, when they catch the light, they have that reddish hue to them. It's just sort of a sheen almost on the wings, so I wanted to try to get that across by only painting this reddish color in certain areas of the wings, as if that's just where, the angle is just right and the wing is catching the light and you can see that reddish warmth coming through. It felt unfinished somehow, so I grabbed a flat brush and just a little bit of my orange, very watered down, and added a bit of a background to July. Honestly, It's been a couple days and I'm still not sure if I like this or not, but I did it. So here you go. It exists. It felt like I needed a little bit of color somewhere else, and that's what I came up with. I left this to dry overnight once again out of an abundance of caution, and then I scanned it and made sure that all the colors were accurate in Photoshop and printed it out on a piece of regular printer paper so I could glue it into my bullet journal in a way that wouldn't make the page super thick and stiff, and also meaning that I could keep the original painting outside of my bullet journal. The rest of this setup is going to be pretty straightforward, cutting my tabs, setting up my monthly calendar and my weekly spreads. These are all going to be exactly the same as they have been for a couple months now. So instead of talking you through that, because you can check out any of my last several monthly plan with me's to get a little bit more detail on these, I'm going to give you some facts about the house sparrow. I feel like I wanted to bring this back. I used to give facts in my Plan With Me videos that had to do with the theme, and I haven't done it in a while, so let's go. House sparrow facts. This is from allaboutbirds.com. Their description is a chunky, full-breasted bird with a round head and a stout bill. Breeding males have gray crowns, white cheeks, a black bib, and a chestnut neck. Interestingly enough, house sparrows aren't related to other North American sparrow species, and they have their own distinct shape. They are chunkier, rounder, they have fuller chests, rounder heads, shorter tails, and stouter bills. They are generally 5.9 to 6.7 inches in length, or 15 to 17 centimeters. They weigh 0.9 to 1.1 ounces on average, or 27 to 30 grams. And their wingspan is 7.5 to 9.8 inches, or 19 to 25 centimeters. All About Birds describes house sparrows as noisy, which is funny to me. They definitely love to chirp and talk to each other, especially the whole flock of them that seem to live in our lilac bushes in the backyard. But I wouldn't call them particularly noisy, at least compared to some of the other birds we get visiting frequently, especially the murder of crows who live in our neighborhood. And to be honest, maybe it's not really a fair comparison because I feel like any other bird sounds quiet compared to a murder of crows. They are just on a whole other level, decibel-wise. An interesting fact about house sparrows is that they live around humans specifically. They are absent from undisturbed forests and grasslands. They specifically live in cities, near parks and zoos, or even in the countryside, specifically near farms where humans live. Apparently, they have been living near humans for centuries. House sparrows have a pretty wide spanning habitat across the Americas, or more accurately, from north to south. They can live as far north as the southern ends of the Northwest Territories and Nunavut in Canada, all the way through where I live in the Canadian Prairies, and can be found in almost every single province and territory in Canada. They also can be found all the way through the United States, down through Mexico. They can be found throughout the Caribbean and right down into South America, although they don't seem to be as common in the northern part of South America, which is very interesting, but they're present in the eastern and southern tips, as well as in a thin stripe along the western coast. I find it so interesting that they don't seem to live in the central and northern parts of South America, but if you live in any of these purple areas, you probably have seen a house sparrow, just like I do every single day. And that brings us to the end of this setup, a nice, quick, and simple one in honor of my house sparrow friends, once again trying to put out into the universe that they should trust me and land in my hand so I can give them all the treats, and by treats I mean bird feed that is healthy for them. Thanks so much for hanging out with me while I set up my bullet journal for July. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And with that, I'm gonna get going. Thanks for watching. Thank you to my patrons for your support. My patrons, as always, will be getting exclusive printables from this setup, in this case, both the black and white inked version and the finished painted version of this cover page art for them to use either digitally or to print out and use in their own journals. So feel free to join the Patreon if you're interested in getting monthly printables. I hope you're all having a wonderful summer so far, or winter if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. and I will see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.